Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Dr2Dr in the chat room. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Shaw, and I have our beautiful and outstanding co-host in the virtual room, and we will be sharing our voices in the radio room with you today. We are so glad and happy that you have come back to share another Saturday with us. We thank you guys so much for that because we cannot do it without you. So keep the support coming. We're praying for bigger and better. And we know that whatever it looks like, we cannot do it without you. So thank you. We know that you could be doing so many other things on a Saturday afternoon, but every week you choose to come back and listen in as we discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. Hey, Dr. Nicole, how are you?
I'm good, Dr. Rhonda. How are you?
I'm doing well. What you got going on this beautiful Saturday?
Well, it's good to be here. As always, we like to start the show out with a reminder about COVID-19 and the importance of continuing to take this thing seriously.
Yeah.
We are doing better, but we are not out of the woods quite yet. So please, everybody, continue to wear those masks, continue to practice social distancing, and please, if you are able to get that vaccine, please consider doing so. We all want to get back to normal life, whatever that looked like before this pandemic took over. And these are really the only ways that we are going to be able to do so.
Yes.
As always, stay safe out there and make smart decisions when it comes to this coronavirus.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Dr. Nicole, thousands of people across the country have been wrongfully convicted. In fact, I was reading an article by the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, that says that since 1989, there have been over 2,500 exonerations.
Wow.
Almost 400 of those exonerations were through DNA evidence. And on average, each person that was exonerated had spent like 8 years, 10 months in prison for crimes they did not commit. The EGI says that there are more innocent people in prisons and jails than ever before.
Wow.
And that the rate of exonerations continue to rise, and that there's a lack of accountability for our police, for prosecutors, and it's undermining our criminal justice system. But most importantly of all, it's ruining the lives of men and women across this country every day. And families. There you go. So today we're going to explore this topic of wrongful convictions, and we will hear from a man that has unfortunately had his own experience with a wrongful conviction, and he's had his own lived experience through with this process of being exonerated. And as we go through the show today, I pray that every man and woman that is in this position will find, the support and the help that they need, to get through this. And I pray God's peace with them, as they are in this situation, until they can find a way out. But I'd love for us to just bring our guest on board now, and let's just talk to him and hear his story.
Absolutely. So our guest today is Dr. William E. Arnold Jr. He is a native of Memphis and a proud graduate of Memphis City School System. He received degrees from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and Tennessee State University before engaging in what is now 17 years of experience in higher education and community engagement. That's amazing. Dr. Arnold believes that experiential learning and inclusion are the keys to building a better society, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what he means by that shortly. But in 2013, Dr. Arnold was wrongfully accused and convicted of crimes that he did not commit. He spent 7 years in prison until his conviction was overturned in 2020. So today he's going to share with us his story. and explain what he means by family and friends with a PH.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear about that. So Dr. Arnold, welcome and thank you for being here with us today. How are you doing?
I am well, thank you, Dr. West, and also Dr. Shaw, just for having me here today. So I have a little home training. So if I didn't say thank you first, a lot of people that had a hand in raising me would definitely slap that hand.
Especially that William E. Arnold Sr.
Don't play, please don't play. He will, among other things. He will slap more than just my hand. So I want to thank you all for just giving me this opportunity to be here today and to share my story and to talk to you a bit about just one of the true injustices that continues to go on here in our country.
Yeah. We appreciate you being open to that, to sharing your story. As a matter of fact, if Dr. West is okay, I know she has some questions about some things in the bio, but I would love for you to just start with your story. Let's just hear your story, and then we can move through the interview otherwise.
Sure. Okay. Well, Dr. West really summed it up, and I guess I'll expand a bit on that and to say that I'm a native Tennessean. My life has existed pretty much up and down I-40. I was born here in Memphis, raised in the Memphis City school system, educated at White Station High School. Single mom. Though I never lived in a house with my dad, he's always been in and a big part of my life. He's actually my best friend, so I'm happy and proud to say that. After I finished school at White Station, I went up 40 and landed at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. I had a great time there. Got involved in campus life in some amazing and very good ways. Finished school and then moved to Nashville in '96, and it was there that I began to work for Tennessee State University, and I found what I thought was my calling in life, which was working in higher ed. So I worked there as a dorm director, went to school, got a master's, left TSU, and then began to work because I thought for a minute that I wanted to be a college president. That's what seemed like what I really wanted to do. So I pursued a doctorate degree in higher education administration. I received that from Tennessee State. And during that time, I continued to work in higher education, particularly for the state of Tennessee, Tennessee Higher Education Commission for a number of years, and then finally the Board of Regents. But during that time, one thing that had been instilled in me was always being a servant leader, giving back because somebody gave to you, somebody poured into me, and it was my job to pour into someone else.
Yeah.
And so with that, I continued to serve in organizations that I become affiliated with while I was at the University of Tennessee, and then just in life, served on a few boards, things of this nature, and tried to continue to be who the folks who raised me to be, to exist, so to speak, for lack of a better term. And it was during that time that I volunteered for a very well-known organization in Nashville. That organization had a partnership with my college fraternity, which I was active in my alumni chapter. At the time that all this really got really involved, I was the president of the chapter. So by example, I felt it was important that I volunteer with this organization because the executive director of the local chapter of that organization was also a member of my alumni chapter of my fraternity. So he's recruiting brothers to volunteer and to help out. So I felt that as a servant leader, I had to lead by example. So I had a young man that I was mentoring. I was assigned to him in 2007. In 2010, he made some allegations against me that were false. In 2011, I was arrested. I had to turn myself in because I had a sealed indictment, released on a $100,000 bond. Then I spent the next 2 years fighting these charges. In the summer of 2013, I had a 5-day trial. It was at the end of that 5-day trial that I was convicted about 11 o'clock at night. And I instantly went to jail at least. So it was never an opportunity to get my affairs in order. My car was still sitting outside in the
So
same parking spot.
can I ask
Yeah,
one
sure.
question? I apologize
absolutely.
for just
No worries.
interjecting. So during the time when before you were convicted, when you were kind of fighting the charges, were you incarcerated at that time?
No, for 2 years I was out on bond.
Okay.
As I said, it was a $100,000 bond. I was going to work. I was still serving in other organizations. I did cut all ties with anything dealing with mentoring. So at that point, mentoring was totally off the table and not a part of my life anymore. But I continued to, to try and have as normal a life as possible from 2011 until my trial in 2013. After 5 days, I said I was convicted. I was then in the county jail for about 4 months in solitary confinement. Finally, in December, I was transferred to a prison, Bledsoe County, and I was there for 6 years and 9 months. My case was actually overturned in February of last year, 2020. It was unanimous in terms of a 3-judge panel based on a number of different things, inappropriate comments, or as they used to call it, prosecutorial misconduct by the district attorneys, ineffective assistance of counsel. In other words, my attorneys made some really serious errors. And then finally, the judge in the case made some wrong moves as well. So there were 3 different things that caused it to be overturned. Found out I was getting out of prison, and then COVID hit. So you normally you get 60 days and they let you go, but because of COVID, I had to wait an extra 15 days. But finally, on April 15th of 2020, I was released, walked out, and then in June 30th of last year, all charges were dismissed. So I was, as I said, the sentence was vacated, the conviction was overturned, and I was, kind of left with all the fallout of how do I begin to rebuild a life as a new person, for lack of a better term, because of that lived experience, and also in a very different world. You never realize how fast the world can change. And I always tell people that when I went away to prison, the word selfie didn't even exist.
Wow.
Yeah. We didn't say Black Lives Matter, though we know in our hearts that they do and always will.
Sure.
Lupita Nyong'o was unknown. And the weekend was actually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and not a singer. So I look at all these things that are now so common, but then didn't exist. And it's like, wow. So I had to watch all of that, the Ferguson issues, watch that literally unfold on television and not be an actual part of it. It was 2013, and when I went to prison, President Barack Obama was just in his second term. So it was, as I said, so I missed essentially the whole second term of President Obama's administration, and I had to watch all of that happen on television. So you realize you missed a lot and how fast the world can change in 6 years and 9 months.
So Dr. Arnold, the world changed, but I know you did too, right? So
Indeed.
Who is Dr. Arnold now? Who is the inner man? Not those outside things that
Sure.
yeah, but who is he on, inwardly?
Yeah. And that's a great question, because that's something that, I have to ask myself each day in just my interactions with people, because I see the world differently. He is a much more careful and calculated individual. He's no longer the automatic people person that he used to be, though I still love people, but they exhaust me. And some of it has to do with the experience and having been always, I won't say uptight, but always on alert. And so it's how do you deprogram from that? There's still a lot of collateral damage and fallout that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Simple things like crowds. I'm still not big on crowds, and I was a bit of a social butterfly in my day. But being around a lot of people, like sometimes I can just pull up on the parking lot at a gas station. If it's too many cars, I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because just you're so used to always watching folks and what are they doing, because in that environment, it's such a tense environment, prison, and anything can jump off. And at I mean, you can go from 0 to 60 just like that. So you're constantly alert and aware, and you become so hyper alert that it's just you never really lose that. So you always look for things that aren't quite right, because personal safety is such an important piece of being in that environment and surviving in an environment and making it back home from that environment. So I would say definitely a very calculated and a careful individual.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you, Dr. Arnold. So,
Sure.
can you talk to us about how you managed to cope during those 7 years, right? Because it's one thing for you to understand and accept the consequences for something you know that you did. But when you didn't, in fact, commit a crime that you've been convicted of, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story. So talk to us about how you managed to cope during that time.
Like three things: faith, family, and friends. I mean, you never realize the importance of faith until you have to rely exclusively on that. I said it jokingly once to my dad. I said, man, it's like a Jerry curl, man. If you don't activate it, it ain't gonna be right. And you got to activate that faith. You got
So
to.
listen. I want you to continue where you're going, but I don't want to forget to say this. As minister of music in the church where your folks, your family serves or attend, I saw daily. I mean, every weekly, I saw him and his strength and his faith, right? And how he activated that faith. I mean, I don't really know. Like, I always wondered, and this is so true. Like, I always wondered, because you were away, because you were incarcerated, like, did you really understand how this man was like during that time? I know you felt the support, right? But
Absolutely.
from a faith activation perspective, man, and it was this one song, it's about to leave my head.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna tell you about it before this thing is over, that he would get up and I knew when he stood up, I knew to be ready to play that song, right? I've been through the fire.
I've been through the flood.
Woo, Lord. But but I still have a praise inside of
praise inside of me.
That was the song. That was the song that your dad, and I mean, it was like, if I've ever witnessed an individual, I love your phrase, activating their faith, consistently and not giving up. It was what I saw in your dad and your sister and your mom. Really amazing, just absolutely amazing.
And that's what it came down to. Just you hear people, use that cliche. It was just, at the end of me, there was God. That's it. Because when I went into prison, y'all, I was 41 years old. And I was given a 25-year sentence at 100%, meaning if I didn't fight this and get it overturned, I was going to be 66, almost 67 years old when I walked out of it.
Yeah.
So that was it. I think we've got to take a break. So I'll pick up when we come back from the break. But I just wanted to definitely start with that faith, family, and friends.
We will continue the story with Dr. Arnold when we get back from break. We'll be right back on 94.7 FM.
And we're back on 94.7 FM with Dr. Arnold. And he has been sharing a little bit about his story of being wrongfully accused of a crime back in 2013. And he was just giving us a little bit of his story about how he coped during the 7 years that he was in prison. So, Dr. Arnold, you had mentioned faith, family, and friends was what got you through. Tell us a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I'll say that it started with just that first night. I think it was Friday the 13th, July 13th, 2013. And as I said earlier, I'd just been convicted and I was instantly taken into custody. And so because I'd never been in jail or prison or anything like that, there's sort of this standard operating procedure that they had. And that was for me to be placed into the mental health unit so that I can be observed. So for the first 2 weeks, I was in a cell by myself and the lights were on 24 hours a day. So that way they could watch me. So when I got in that cell, there were two books there. There was this book called, gosh, it's so crazy, I don't remember, but An Innocent Man, by John Grisham, the
Wow.
only, right, the only non-novel here written, and it was actually about a guy who's wrongfully convicted. And if I did commit a crime while I was in prison, I will say that I did keep that book, so I stole it. Okay. And there was also there was a Bible. There was one of those little small green Bibles. No, it wasn't, because no, it couldn't have been a green Bible, but it was a Bible, and it had these little, at the front of some Bibles, they say, for when you're dealing with stress, go to this. When you're dealing with depression, go to this. When
Yeah.
you're dealing with anxiety. And what did I go to? It was, um, be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the Spirit of the Lord, which is beyond all understanding, will comfort your heart.
Oh,
And throughout that 6 years and 9 months, that was what I had to stand on. And I read it, and it was just about, don't be anxious. You got to pray about it. You got to be in this moment, and God is going to comfort you. And that became my rock. That's what started it all. In about 3 days, I received my first piece of mail, and then I received more mail, and then I received more mail, and then I received more mail from, I received letters and cards from people I hadn't seen since elementary, some who were, of course, were my circle at that time, family and friends. I say friends with a PH, and I think you asked about that question. That's sort of an allusion to a couple of organizations that I'm a part of. One is Prince Hall Masonic Lodge, so PH, and the other is my fraternity. And through the fraternity, we tended to jokingly spell F words with a PH, which means phi. So when I say friends, it's an allusion to those two organizations, but also those people who aren't necessarily family by blood or legal means, but who are friends. So it's a way to try and incorporate all those folks, because they came together. When I say they came together, every first Sunday, we would have a prayer call. And that prayer call would have anywhere from 20 to sometimes as many as 70 people. And that prayer call was we'd have 30 minutes to be on the phone. So I'd have to position myself and be in line so that way I can do this prayer call at, I think it was 7 o'clock every first Sunday. And the way it would work is I would give sort of a 10-15 minute update on what my last month had been like. It was a conference call. I'd have to call a cousin who would then put me on three-way onto the prayer call. Then everybody's there. Someone would sing a song. My dad often often sang, "I've been through the fire, I've been through the flood." And it's funny because now, how when people joke about things, it's too soon, too soon. So I got some friends who still joke about your dad. That's your dad's song. That's his jam. If you can call a Christian song his jam, that's his jam. And I'd be like, too soon, too soon.
yeah.
But he would sing. Sometimes, of course, someone else would. There would be a scripture, and then there'd be a prayer. And that was, just a part of that, creating a community, linking people together, folks who never saw each other, because, this was actually, it was pre-COVID, but it was still a time for people to come together on a conference call every first Sunday and just fellowship, and an opportunity for me to let people know that I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay, and I need you all to be okay. Yeah, I've missed a number of graduations, births, deaths, et cetera, but I'm okay, and I'll be back there with you all. I'm being patient. I'm standing on this word. I need y'all to stand on this word. We're gonna get through this.
Wow.
And that's what it was. That's how it went down, ladies.
How much of your, and I think you guys understand what I'm asking. How much of your education, you being at the level of education as you are, do you think played a part in how you managed, how you handle things, right? Because and then even on the flip side of that, how much of who you were as an educated man went against you while being incarcerated?
Yeah, that's another good question, because ironically, a part of my conviction was based on a district attorney who sat in the witness stand and mocked me for being educated. You can actually go to my family, set up a website, Justice, the number 4, William Arnold. And the district attorney in her closing argument sat in the witness stand and mocked me because I had to testify. And her just to kind of paraphrase what she said was, "I'm Dr. William Arnold. I'm articulate, I'm educated, my suit today is immaculate. I don't have time for this. I don't know why I'm even here. I speak the King's English. This is beneath me." So in essence, but I mean, I have to give it to her, it was masterful, because what she did was, in lieu of saying this is a bad black man, and she was black, this is a bad black man because he came to court unprepared, looking rough, talking rough, we need to lock him up. No, this man is bad for us because he's educated and he came to court prepared and he spoke to us with some sense and he articulated his argument. He's bad and that's why he needs to be locked up. So it had nothing to do with guilt or innocence, but it was having the jury look at me and see me as a black man that they're not used to seeing, because you wouldn't see this type of black man on the 5 o'clock or the 10 o'clock news. And that's why y'all need to lock him up, because he's educated. So then you fast forward to how did that transfer inside the penitentiary? It had its ups and it had its downs. Because I am my father's son, I'm talkative. And I'm going to speak my mind. And I also had a background as an investigator through what I had done for the state of Tennessee. So I understood policies, I understood procedures, and I wasn't scared to say that. So that made me have more conflict than non-conflict with the staff. I got along well with the inmates, Aryan Nation, Bloods, Cribs, Vice Lords, no problem. My issues came with seeing people being dehumanized, with seeing policies not being applied equally, particularly when it came to people of color.
Yeah.
Or more importantly, not just people of color, people who just didn't understand.
Sure.
And just in talking to a lot of the guys there, I found out that a lot of them had gotten railroaded because they didn't know what they were signing. I mean, very few people know it, but upwards of 90% of the people who are in prison are there not because they got found guilty, but because they signed a deal because they were scared to go to court.
Yeah.
So you got guys who they didn't want, they threaten you with 30 years. You go, we're gonna give you 9. Yeah, put me down for 9. Or they'll sign and there's no way to appeal that because you took a deal. So it was always interesting to be able to talk to people and to find out how they ended up in this situation. Some were guilty and very few said they weren't, but just the fact that the system was able to manipulate these people. When we talk about issues of mass incarceration and you wonder why there's so many people in prison, it is unfortunate because very few people understand their rights. Or I even had a guy tell me, they call me Doc in prison. He said, "Doc, if I had $5,000 to afford a lawyer, I wouldn't be here. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I took a deal." And I was like, $5,000 and you doing 9 years. I was like, bro, that's serious. So it shows you how economics, how education, how just understanding of processes and procedures can really be a detriment to people. And unfortunately, it's people who look like us and people who come from humble beginnings. And to quote another famous great black man, Richard Pryor, he went to jail once and he told this joke. "See, I went there looking for justice, and that's all I found was just us."
That's right.
And it was plenty of just us in there. I saw people of color and I saw poor whites, and that's what and so those things allowed me to appreciate how the justice system truly operates in America. Truly operates, and gave me a whole different side, because had this not happened to me, I was living my middle class black life, and I never would have thought about it because none of my friends, none of my family, none of them were going to jail. That wasn't going on, so I didn't see how it affected us. But my dad always says, a mouth will say anything. Somebody can say you did something, okay, and before you know it, you can be charged just because somebody said it, and right there, just like that, your life has changed. Change. So yeah.
So Dr. Arnold, when you talk about, people who come from humble beginnings and how the system is really, in a sense, stacked against poor brown people and poor white people. But what do you say to those young people who might be listening right now, who maybe they come from a single family home, Maybe they have teachers or other adults that have told them, you know, you're not going to be anything, or you're going to be in jail.
Yeah.
Or maybe those young people who believe that they don't have a real future. What do you say to them? Because you mentioned coming from a single mother household, and you still went to college. And a lot of times we feel like college isn't for us. I can't afford college. My mom is a single mom. She works, you know, multiple jobs. That can't be my life. What do you say to the young people who feel like that, who might be listening, and might be able to come out on the other side of it like you did?
There is nothing in this world that you can't do. If you believe in you, you got to bet on you. And that is the best thing I tell you. Believe in you. Like you said, college is not for everyone. And I totally understand that. Everyone does not have to go to college. But it is important that you get some sort of education. You get some way that you can sustain not just your life, but the lifestyle that you want to achieve, and to do it legally, and to do it where you're not affecting other people's lives. So that way, when you lay down at night, nobody's kicking in your door. When you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you can look at yourself and smile and know that you haven't done anything wrong to folks, because you have done things the right way. The key is work. That's the trick. You don't have to be the smartest person. You don't have to be the best looking person, but don't let them outwork you. Whoever it is, outwork them. If it means staying up late, if it means getting up early, if it means getting a tutor, if it means reading something else, if it means asking questions, take time, put something in your mind. Because at the end of the day, one thing I always knew when I was in there was they will always have to call me Dr. William.
Yeah.
No matter what, no matter what they may have said under their breath,
it's who you
behind
are.
my back. I know when I get out of here, my name been changed.
So,
and I promise you gonna know it. So yeah.
So I have to ask this question because, you know, I know it was the efforts to mentor that got you in that predicament, but you are clearly naturally a mentor. You are clearly that person. You are that man.
Thank you.
How do you, you know, how do you keep that? You know what I'm saying? And not feel threatened or at risk. How do you keep that?
Well, Zoom is a great thing, because nobody can say you do anything over Zoom. You might have cussed them out or looked at them dirty, but that's about it. So sometimes let's just appreciate the blessings that the pandemic has brought into our lives, man. But for me, I know that I will never again work with anyone under the age of 18. And it's just that's just it is what it is.
That's a really unfortunate, but yeah.
So that's first. We all, as professionals, understand the importance of risk management. I like to tell folks this is risk management on a whole other level. Things like calculating your moves, knowing where cameras are, knowing where exit doors are, making certain that you can always justify and show where you were. So that way it's never nothing can be misconstrued, as people like to say often, that no, I was there and you can check your cameras or you can do this. So being very organized, very conscious, very aware of your surroundings and how you can prove where you are, whether it's documenting conversations, using whatever apps you have or find on your phone that allow you to say, I was at this place at this time. And then just removing yourself from situations. As I said, you know, part of my job for the state, my last job, was investigating harassment issues, whether they were issues dealing with race, gender, sexual harassment. So I had to have a number of closed door meetings. But in the last 2 years of my working for the board in preparation for my trial, I just changed the way I did that. I mean, I had an iPad with a front facing and rear facing camera. So I had to have a number of closed door meetings. First of all, if you close that door, know that I'm going to record this meeting. So that way there's no misunderstanding. And I'm going to record it from the time you start talking until the time you walk out that door, simply because it's going to protect both of us. So a lot of times it's understanding how to position it where a person doesn't feel intimidated by you documenting it, but letting them know that, hey, I'm protecting both of our interests. Because after this is over, you can say something, I can say something like, no, here's a video, where I immediately followed up with an email to clarify what we said. And I asked you at the end of that email, if I'm not clear, please let me know that this is what we discussed and this is what we agreed on. So just being conscious of the importance of CYA and utilizing everything at your disposal to be able to make certain that you're protecting yourself, because I would hate for anyone else's child or anyone else's family to have to go through what I went through because of a lie. But people do it every day. They see your titles, they see what you're wearing, they see what you're driving. And when I was working on my dissertation, ladies, it was one thing that will always stand out to me. In America, we educate 8 attorneys for every 1 engineer. In Japan, they educate 8 engineers for every 1 attorney. So they tend to build their way to success, and we tend to sue.
There's a message there, absolutely.
So what I'm always telling folks is be conscious. Be conscious, because people are always looking to come up. The hustle is real. The hustle is real.
It absolutely is. You know, I want to talk about, and we've talked about it. You've mentioned it, you know, a little, but I don't want to just gloss over how this experience impacted your family. Okay. And I'd love for you to talk about life now. You know, what has life been like after? Let's talk about that when we come back from break. We'll be right back on 94.7 FM. And we are back on 94.7 FM. We are here with Dr. William E. Arnold Jr. And we are hearing about his story of a wrongful conviction. And when we left, I was asking about how did you utilize your time during this period, and talk to us in detail about the impact that it had on your family.
Right. Yeah. Well, when I was in prison, one of the things that kept my mind busy was reading. I've always loved reading, and I got to read a lot of books that I hadn't read and probably needed to read before then. So reading was really important to me, and gave me just sort of an outlet, and also gave me the ability to connect with others, because I shared my books. I felt that was important. Donating them to the library, just giving them to guys, just sometimes order multiple copies, because of certain books that I felt a lot of men, particularly Black men, that I needed to read. So you got number time, hey, it's time to read. So that was a way that I was able to cope and deal with that 6 years and 9 months. But to answer your other question, I think of the criminal justice system in America as sort of a 4-part thing. The first part is or how you deal with the criminal justice system is you enter it first through the police way. And that is, the police arrest you, you deal with police brutality, the issues that people across the country are really frustrated, with how it's affecting our communities. The second piece would be the court system and the district attorneys. Which was, what I had to deal with. My attorney was ineffective. The district attorneys made inappropriate comments, and then the judge also did something wrong in terms of a pre-trial decision. So that's the second piece. The third piece is the custodial piece, and that's when you're actually in jail or in prison, and you're dealing with the dehumanization, with being having your dignity being stripped from you, where you go through a process. And I was telling somebody about this the other day. Can you imagine going 6 years and 9 months and no one ever calls you by your first name? You never hear anybody call you Rhonda or Nicole. Dale Carnegie Jr., if you've ever heard of him, he was this famous salesman. He wrote this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I had to read it in college. And he said that the sweetest sound to every person in the world is the sound of their name. That's the sweetest sound. You love to hear Rhonda Shaw. You love to hear Nicole West. But they called us by our last names. or they called us by our inmate numbers. So nobody ever called me William.
Will you
So you
forever
go
know
through
that number?
524-840 is water wet. Yeah, I'm never gonna forget that.
Yeah.
Ever, ever, ever. So you go through this process of them stripping you of your humanity. And then after all that's happened, then you go through what's called re-entry. You're now what they call either a returning citizen or a justice involved individual. Those are sort of the politically correct terms that they use.
Yeah.
But you're re-entering society. So it's now, how do I re-enter society after having been in this environment for so long? How do I all of a sudden deal with people not walking in a straight line? Because everywhere we went, you get to walk in a straight line. Somebody, you couldn't run. You get written up for running. You know, so if you ever saw somebody running, it'd be a guard running to help another guard because they had some sort of code or an emergency. So even now, when I see people breaking out running, it startles me. So it forever. So you become unknowingly a totally different person in how you deal with people. You know, thankfully, and that's something I've told folks about. There wasn't textings. We didn't have tablets or phones, but you had to have conversations. So, you know, and the unfortunate part now as I re-enter society is that people are now so much more involved in their smartphones, because smartphones had just come out in 2011, 2012. And so now I see how important and how engrossed people are with their phones and don't have the ability to communicate. There's no emotional intelligence. There's no understanding of how to read a room and deal with people and share and care. It's all electronic. So I'm thankful for some of those things, but again, as I said, I'm a different person. So it's my family constantly having to realize that sometimes things can get overwhelming. You know, a lot of noise, a lot of movement. You know, after I had a cousin get ordained this past weekend, I went to the ordination. You know, people were socially distanced, but as soon as it was over, I had to go because everybody was congregating in the lobby. So it's not about the pandemic. The pandemic actually for me was a blessing because it gave me the opportunity to try and catch up with the world because everything was so slow. Had I gotten out and the world was still moving around as fast, I wouldn't have known how to do it. But, you know, I'm driving a car and I'm like, ooh, yeah. So it's different. Now I'm still trying to get used to these what do you call these things? These muscle cars, boy. These folks in these muscle cars scare me. Yeah. It makes you uncomfortable. Like, you remember when you were in college?
What's the muscle car? Y'all know I'm old.
You know those Dodge Chargers and those Mustangs and Corvettes, and they just
oh my.
Wait, I didn't know a Corvette was one.
I mean, well, no, not a Corvette, the Camaro. It's the muscle car.
Yes,
you know, those cars, yeah. And it gives you that uncomfortable feeling like when you were a freshman in college and you went to your first little party and all of a sudden Atomic Dog came on.
Yeah.
And the energy in the whole room shifted. We're just gonna leave it at that. So that's how I feel when those cars drive by with all that noise. Like, ooh, what that mean? So So anyway, so as I say, it's getting used to how the world has changed, or just driving, seeing people not paying attention because they're on their phone. So re-entry is different. But I at least had a baseline of understanding things like technology and email addresses and how to find things. So imagine a person who's been in prison 15, 20 years, and you're telling them you need to go find a job. There are no more bulletin boards and stuff stuck on it. That's not what everything's .com, .org, .gov. So re-entry can be challenging. And it was even challenging for me because you got to get used to these things that you did not have access to. And so I'm often telling people, you have to be patient. You have to be. It's like being physically reborn again, and you're having to understand about checking emails and checking things and answering phones, and because we didn't have all that. We had, I think,
take for granted now.
Absolutely.
And I just think your perspective is so outstandingly just keen, and I mean, I hate to say, people love talking about blessings in disguise and all of that, but I mean, it's got to be true that your perspective would not be as such, right, without having this lived experience. And I just think that perspective is so good for our society as a whole, and what you bring, what you can bring to our society.
And so with that, I have to tell folks, if you have a friend, a family member that's in prison, write them. write them, send them a card, keep them grounded in knowing that somebody cares about them and that that's not the end of the world, because prison is a very dark place. You meet some folks who are there, going to be there, and unfortunately, some of them belong there, and it is what it is. But there are still people there who are struggling because if you, I can't begin to tell you what it's like to be separated from your family every holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every holiday. So just if you can try and make sense of just 1 year where I don't see my family on the holidays, that's just not happening. That's not happening. So if you can imagine every holiday, every year, and what that makes you feel like, and how that begins again, as I say, that whole dehumanization process, and you're no longer connected to society, and you come back and you try and make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, and then each person's lived experience is different. That's the beauty of diversity, that is different. How do you get through it? How do you overcome it? Because we each have those different experiences, even in there. Because some people's time is a lot tougher than other people's times, and but they're all still somebody's son, somebody's grandson, nephew, uncle, dad, and the hope is that they'll get to come home to those folks so that they can hear their name, their first names being called again, and they can be called dad or son or granddad.
So how have you connected, otherwise? I mean, some things that haven't changed, right? You have to have a home and, a job, a livelihood, and,
Sure.
how have you connected in those ways?
Well, thankfully I had a large network of folks who had access to countless resources.
Mm-hmm.
So large family on both sides, family members who've opened their homes. I had a fraternity brother who was like, look, man, I mean, it was so crazy. I got out of prison on a Thursday. On that Friday, he said, bro, I got 3 cars. Take my truck till you don't need it anymore. So I hadn't driven in 6 years and 9 months, and my license hadn't expired yet. It actually kept it up for me. So I literally drove to Memphis on that Saturday. I've been out of prison less than 24 hours. Most peaceful 3-hour drive I ever had in my life. I was looking around like, but I hadn't driven in so long. But so I've never, so things that most returning citizens don't have. I had a place to stay. I had an automobile. I had people who gave me money. So there was one guy I remember talking to who was actually about to end his sentence, and explained to me that the 2 halfway houses in his city wouldn't accept him. One didn't accept arsonists, and he had an arson charge. The other didn't accept rapists, and he had a rape charge. So he couldn't go to either one. And he was told me, Doc, I'm probably going to be living under a bridge. So can you imagine knowing that when that day comes, what you're looking forward to is being homeless?
Wow.
You know that. Yeah.
So what's your purpose?
My purpose is to make certain, A, this doesn't happen to anyone else. Sharing this story. B, humanizing those men and women who are in prison. And then I believe finally creating some sort of pathway for those folks that come home, because it's said that 95% of the people who are in prison have what they call an out date, a date they're going to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I begin to try and help with resources, with information, so that when those people do come home, they can try to be as whole as possible?
Mm-hmm.
They that my lived experience can help their lived experience, because you can't explain to anybody what it's like to write a dissertation or to defend a dissertation if they've never done it. You can say, well, I wrote a book, and because essentially is what you did. I read, because when people ask me about, well, what was it like getting a doctorate? I said, I paid a little more money, took a few more classes, and wrote a few more papers. That's the easiest way I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way to really get people to understand the place and the space that you have to mentally and emotionally be in, and how engrossed you become with nothing but this, because it seems like it consumes so much of you. And that's what prison does, because you're in this environment where 24 hours a day, you locked up, no matter what.
Yeah.
You can't go outside and look at the moon. You can't. So unless you've been there, you can't truly. So being able to take that experience, take this knowledge, this information, this unfortunate incident, and trying to let other people know that even after you come out of that, you still can. You still can live a good life. You still can do. You can take this and you can take these lemons and you can make the best lemonade possible. And if you want, you can put some flavor.
Do you have an immediate next? You know, what's next? Do you have an immediate one?
Yes, there's some things on the horizon in terms of some opportunities that have been presented to me very recently of doing some work particularly in that field.
Sure.
So I'm weighing my options. I've been doing some consulting where it's given me the opportunity to take not just this experience, but also work that I've done as a diversity practitioner before prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to see the value in people, because my story now is that I've met people who couldn't read a book, but could make a book.
Sure.
I've met people who taught themselves how to paint,
Mm.
how to draw, how to knit. So when people who have true skill sets that they developed without any formal training, people who know how to do more with less, people who can diversify your workforce in ways you never imagined.
Mm.
And why wouldn't you want to put these people to work or put them in a position to win? Because when they win, we win, because they're not stealing, killing, robbing, and doing stuff that's going to have us tense and walking around going, what in the world?
Yeah.
So there's still value. There's so much value because it's about the people. And these are still people at the end of the day. If a person is paid his or her debt to society, let it be paid.
Yeah.
It's paid, it's done. Let them go on with their life. We all make mistakes. And I think if the light was shed on it, heck, and everybody knew what everyone really did, it'd be maybe more people in prison and probably for what they actually did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Dr.
the thing.
Arnold,
Always find value.
what advice would you give someone who is coming out of jail, who's going to re-enter society, who maybe does not have the amount of resources that you were blessed to have when you re-entered? You know, somebody like the gentleman you were just speaking of, who
Sure.
didn't have anywhere to go and was going to be turned away from every job because of their conviction. And what advice would you have for someone in that situation?
Be diligent about finding the right people, finding the right organizations. There are churches, there are state agencies, there are nonprofit organizations. If someone gives you a flyer or a brochure, follow up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
The unfortunate part is, as I said, a lot of people aren't tech savvy. I've had a learning curve myself. And so using the internet and things of that nature, they may not know how to do, but you can always go knock on the door. You can go somewhere and listen to people, allow them to direct you to the places that have these resources available, because there are some things that are out there. I've met with a number of folks just in the last year who do this professionally, not just in Memphis, but also in Nashville, and offices opening in Chattanooga. So it is a statewide thing. It's a matter of time of just some entity getting its arms around it so that there's some sort of centrally located point of entry where people can be met where they are based on their ability to comprehend, to make sense of, and to utilize whatever's before them. So don't give up, follow up.
So let me ask you this. We have less than 60 seconds before we have to move to a close. Would you be willing to come back? We love keeping mental health at the forefront. Would you be willing to come back and talk to us about incarceration and mental health?
Yes.
I think that's a biggie. Would you come back and talk to us? We are so happy that you came and you shared your story with us today. Thank you so much for being open. I do pray that you will move into the world more and get your story out there and help young men. I'm the mother of a young Black man, right? Would love for him to have these kind of conversations. Thank you guys again for coming back again, another Saturday to share with us. And we will see you all next Saturday at the same time, right here on the Gospel Giant 94.7 FM. We'll see you then.